Welcome back to the Spiritual Uplevel Podcast. I'm your host, Jeri Cristine, and today we have with us Tina Andrews, a fellow Omaha native. Are you an Omaha native?
For the last 30 years, yeah, we'll call
Yeah.
it.
I'm not technically an Omaha native either, but I lived there for 15 years, so kind of the same. So, Tina is a midlife empowerment coach who helps women navigate the challenges of midlife as they search for renewed purpose and joy. With over a decade of coaching experience, Tina offers individual and group coaching as well as retreats designed to empower women to embrace this transformative stage of life. Tina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to get to talk to you today, Jeri.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you, Tina, because I'll tell you what, girl, I have had a few dark nights of the soul, but most recently was what one of my friends told me to embrace as a midlife awakening. And
Mm-hmm.
it was all of that. I mean, I was struggling to get out of bed for a while, and just all the changes. And I started TikTok is my crack, I guess. It's my Netflix. I don't watch TV, but I'll look on TikTok. And I just started looking for people that were talking about this experience that I was having. And I realized that it was a midlife change that I was going through. I
Yeah.
needed hormones and I needed somebody to support me that knew what I was going through. So,
Yeah.
how did you tell us about I want to really get into what you do and how you do it. But first of all, tell us how you came to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So as far as just be getting into coaching, I've been working with coaches for 20 plus years. I ran a company. We started and led a company with my ex-husband for 23 years. And so we brought in a business coach, this has been back in like 2004 or something. And I learned so much from him. So then I started hiring life coaches and different things. I ended up hiring a health coach about 14, maybe 15 years ago now. And that's what helped move me. I have weight issues since I was a child. I was able to release 100 pounds with that. And so there's just so much power in coaching.
Yeah.
So I started in the health and wellness arena with coaching kind of part-time while I was also running the business with my husband at the time, my ex-husband. And then as so I divorced about 4 or 5 years ago. And so through the process of that, I decided to go deeper. I left that business and go deeper into the coaching. And I just feel it's what I'm meant to do, right? It's just, and I've changed my focus into midlife empowerment because going through that pivotal piece, right, with the divorce and midlife, and like you were talking about all the menopause changes and the roles and empty nesting and all the different things, like all collides. And it was a struggle to get through all of that. And even with my coaching background, right, I kept like searching for the next thing and diving deeper and trying to heal myself and work through things. And so then I realized all the stuff that I've been doing, right? We coach what we know. So
Yeah.
it's like I didn't
Yeah.
go through all of this for nothing. And now I have a wisdom that I can share with other women. And so that's what I do through that, like I said, through the individual coaching and through those retreats that I do. Yeah. So it's very fulfilling.
Yeah, I bet. I love that. Yes, we coach what we know, and going through something difficult like that led to you having wisdom that you can share with other people. So, talk to us about the changes that women go through in midlife that leads to this. I hate calling it a crisis. However, that's how the world knows it. So just talk to us about that process and how
Yeah.
you help people through that.
Yeah, so it's such a pivotal time for women. I mean, I work with women, but kind of in that mid 40s range. Brene Brown talks about it being a midlife unraveling. And I think that is so I love the way she describes that because it's like one little piece starts coming and pretty soon, right, everything's starting to unravel. But it's this idea of all these roles that we've played throughout our lives and we've poured our whole life into our kids and our spouse and our careers or the business and volunteering and like all the things, right? Everything is outward focused. Feels like we're pouring into everybody else. And then we come to this point in our life when Now, the kids don't need us as much, and pretty soon they're leaving the nest, and there's changes in our intimate relationships often. There's the changes with us personally, with menopause, and all of it's like this, the perfect storm. And it starts to be to this point where we realize we can't keep up this facade or all this stuff that we're trying to show up as being perfect and doing this for everybody else. It's
Mm.
just, yeah, it's at this point where we realize that things have to change. And once you start seeing one piece of it, it seems like everything starts, it can be like dominoes where you start seeing other pieces. Um, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be a place where you can start doing some deep healing that's never been, that you've been pushing off for all these years. You've been so busy. And it seems like people come to a point, like you said, like you can't get out of bed and things are just imploding. And it forces us to slow down, take a look at what's going on. It's like, who are we really? We know everything else about how we can help everybody else, but who are we? What do we need? What do we want even? And so there's this really great process of helping women go inward and unpeeling all those layers and now finding a new purpose, a new joy in life that's more inward focused. Like we get to do what we want to do. And it feels so selfish at first. And it's like, but
Ah,
we get that chance to do what lights us up. And a lot of times it takes us a while to even figure out what that is. So,
it does. You know, I'm 49 and a half, and having just went through this, at first it did feel selfish. And then I was like, I don't really give a flying F about what anybody else thinks. I'm almost 50. It's time for me to live my life. And
yeah,
I slowed down so much and I'm doing more meaningful work. And I love it. And I love it so much that I wish everyone could have this and not have to get, to that point. Like I would,
mm,
I, I don't know. I kind of, while you were talking, I'm wondering, in today's age, I wonder if younger and younger people are starting to have some of these awakenings. I feel like there's a lot of the younger generations aren't really falling for the living for everybody else as much as our generation and above did. And I really encourage that because it's
yeah,
really incredible when you focus inward and you know who you are and you know what you're here for.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. There's this great quote. I wrote it down too. So that's it's one I've loved for years, but Paulo Coelho, who wrote The Alchemist, but it says, maybe the journey isn't so much about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that really isn't you, so you can become who you were meant to be in the first place. And that just sums up my feelings, my philosophy, my coaching so much.
That's so beautiful. I need to write that on my wall.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So so what's the biggest challenge that you find with women who are starting to go through this process?
Um, Fighting it,
Yeah.
right, is part of it. And then getting to this point where it is an ending, especially if we're talking about the kids leaving the nest, but even a lot of women are caring for aging parents, or maybe if they pass on, and there's so many endings. And it's like, okay, but every ending is also a beginning. This is
Mm.
not the end of the road. This is the start of a new journey, which, it may be a fork in the road. Sometimes it feels like a roundabout. Like there's so many places
That's
you get
true.
stuck in this roundabout because you're too paralyzed to move forward. Um, but yeah, it's that awakening and just realizing that, okay, there is a whole second chapter, a whole second half, and just and there's a grief process too. We don't want to just be toxic positivity and like, hey, it's like, let's, whatever it is that's going on in life, because there's usually an event, like I said, the empty nester or parents passing away or a divorce or burned out in your career. There's some event that kind of really implodes everything. And then getting into our bodies, feeling that, processing it, not ignoring it, not getting busy with things, whether it's, shopping or working or exercise, whatever it is, that overings that we're doing, the numbing out, and just being present and doing that body work, getting out of our heads and into our body is so powerful.
I find that that's interesting too at this stage of life, though, because also our bodies are different. Our faces look different, everything is different. And so sometimes I find that women in that stage are a little more reluctant to get in their body, or else that's an ending too. Like,
Mhm.
okay, you're like, I used to run marathons. I don't run anymore because of back stuff. Um, that was an ending. But now I found this other beautiful space in my body, and it's not perfect by any means, but there's so many amazing things about it. And I'm embracing it more than I ever did before.
Yeah.
Before this time, I felt like I had to be perfect, not just living for everybody else, but that that elusive perfectionist standard that's always out there and you're always chasing it. And
Mhm.
now there's no perfection. It's just, I don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
Need it.
It's a time of, for a lot of women to really start. I know it was true for me of getting into that self-compassion, like
Mm.
understanding that there's a reason that you did the things that you did, or the self-compassion, like say how your body changes, like this is what it is. It's a miracle that we exist, right? Like things
Yeah.
shift and change, but let's be grateful and have gratitude for all of the things that are in our life. Um, but yeah, the self-compassion is a big thing. And you mentioned perfectionism, and a lot of that is like trying to outrun shame. That's the other side of it. So again, when all of these things are coming up where we're dealing with grief or getting back into, I mean, childhood things start popping back up. It's getting down to the processing of that shame and releasing that. And yeah, it's such an interesting process. So that's not always the word I would choose as interesting, but it can be
You know
really
what though?
difficult.
Oddly, that's the word I use all the time too. Like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of other words for it. And like peeling back the layers. Oh my gosh, you know, I don't know, you think you master one layer or you've released something, and then some sort of trigger will happen where something comes up that you're like, oh my gosh, I thought I dealt with this, and it's a whole other deeper layer.
Mhm.
Yeah, that self-compassion too. Like you said, understanding that there's a reason that you did the things that you did,
Yeah.
and being grateful for the journey and grateful for where you are today.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So tell us a little bit about how you work with somebody. Like if someone comes to you, and another question, you said it's usually an event. Are people usually in crisis when they come to you? I don't see a lot of women embracing this before crisis time.
Right. I mean, it's at a point where they know something's got to change, right? You can keep trying to sweep it under the rug. It just gets harder and harder. And at some point, it's like, okay, let's look at this. Let's deal with it. And it helps to have somebody, work along it through that process with you and help guide you through it. So, some of my clients come to me through individual coaching, and I don't have a cookie cutter approach, but we start looking at where they are now. We start, we create our own reality to some extent. And so it's like looking at what our part wasn't like to where we're at now. And then how do we want to move forward? What do we want that to look like? And so we dive into a lot of inner stuff with that. Then also a lot of women come to me through my group programs. So I do a program through that's based on Brene Brown's work called Wholehearted Living. So that's kind of an entry point. So that kind of guides, like if they're like, okay, that's cool, and that's as much as we want to do, but then some people are like, oh, I need to go deeper. And then, then they jump into the individual coaching from there. Um, and then I have my retreats too. So some people find me through my retreats and then realize there's all this other, I say work, but it's not all work, right? It could be play. We want to play around with things, to be curious, to think at things through a different lens and start looking at life a little bit differently. And so with the stuff that we learn at the retreat, oftentimes they'll kind of catch the bug, like, okay, yeah, I really want to go deeper with this. So
Yeah. So talk to us about your retreats. I know you do retreats, you love retreats like me. I say if I could do a retreat every weekend, I would. There's so much, there's just so much that happens in a group of other women who are a safe space, who are all doing their work. The energy is just so incredible. So tell us about your retreats.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's so cool that you do retreats too. I was excited when I heard that you did that. And there's such a valuable experience because you're pulling yourself away from the day to day. That's a big thing in itself. Some women, they're like, I haven't traveled alone in 20 years, right? Because it's always been with the family or the spouse and all the things. So just even that and putting themselves first can be a big deal. And then I have them in beautiful spaces. So they're usually an oceanfront property. And so being in that kind of elevated space, that changes the energy and they start thinking bigger. They start thinking of in grander ways, right? Than just being in your little bubble at home and such. And like I said, there's always this energy and this magic when women come together, but especially when they come together intentionally. And so when they come to retreat, they understand it's not just going to be surface level. Like they've come to a point where they're like, okay, I'm ready to have these conversations. I'm ready to at least look inward. And I am just always surprised by the synchronicity of the people that come together, right? Like I put it out there in the universe and I always say the right people will show up. And when they come together and the connections they make, it is instant bonding. I'm always so surprised by how lifelong friendships develop after that and how they continue on. And even after the retreats, we're doing Zooms every month, because people want to continue to be in touch and see how things are going. But as far as like the structure of the retreats, they're usually 4 nights and we do in the mornings, we have morning sessions. We start with like, I call it light or gentle yoga that one of the other coaches that I work with, she does that and some reflections. And in the morning, we have conversations, guided discussions. We're starting to dig into some of these ideas and we talk about it and journal about it and then discuss it and have some breakout sessions even where people get to talk a little bit more in depth with others. But then in the afternoons, they have time on the beach, or we'll usually do some kind of boating outing. And then we also have like a bonfire on the beach, and we do a seafood boil, and we do a sound bath at the end too, because the vibrations of the sound help integrate all these processes. There's some meditation. So one of the things about retreats that are so different than the other one, it's very immersive, right? It's the 4 days. But you know how heavy sometimes that inner work can get. And it's just like you feel like you're plodding through it. And through retreats, we have the ability to like stack different modalities to change up the energy. So, of course, there's going to be tears, but there is so much laughter. There's so much connection. And I mean, we all crave connection with others at this
Yeah.
point, especially at this time in our lives. Um, so yeah, just the energy and how things shift and to see people from the beginning coming in like, I don't know anybody. And these are small groups. They're usually just 8 or 10 women. And to see them open up and then, when they leave, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go forward and see what the next chapter is. And oh, the other thing that I've started incorporating is like an empowerment photo shoot on the beach. And, at first the women are like, I don't know about that. At the end, when I talk to them, most women say that was their favorite part of the whole retreat because I have a
Oh, wow.
photographer that is just like very, let it go, like just it's not posed. And she finds that inner radiance, that inner beauty in all of us. And so I find that very interesting because I thought it would be a cool idea, but I did not expect people to find that so beneficial. I've had people said, I haven't had individual pictures taken since senior pictures in high school. Like it's
Well,
like,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, how
Um,
often do you do that? You get business headshots, like it's not the same as that.
yeah.
That's really cool. I'm with you. I wouldn't have thought it would be that effective, but especially for women at this age of our life, finding our new beauty and
Mhm.
letting the inner light come out, I can imagine how impactful that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's really
how many
great.
retreats do you do per year?
I usually do 3 retreats a year.
Okay.
And so I do one in the fall in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is always a really cool vibe, like in September. I love the Outer Banks. So much beauty there, and it's a different type of atmosphere than Florida. And the one I have coming up in February is in the Panhandle of Florida, the Gulf Coast. So
Beautiful, beautiful.
yeah.
Nice. And I can imagine myself there. I kind of got lost as you were describing it. I was envisioning like being on the beach. I love that. So another thing that you do is integration coaching for people who do plant medicine journeys, specifically psilocybin.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, I love that you do that because I have felt since my journey with medicine began that that is something that is dearly missing in that
Mhm.
world. A lot of there are people who have started doing it, and to be honest with you, a lot of them are a bit too hippie and out there for me, and for those who are listening to us, I hope they go to the YouTube channel too and see how grounded and normal. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was to let people know that there's real normal, like average everyday people who are finding so much healing from these different modalities that they want to share it with the rest of the world. And so, talk to us a little bit about your integration coaching and how that works.
Yeah. Well, that all came about because I've had experience myself with sitting with the medicine with psilocybin and um yeah, so there's these profound experiences that happen, but if you just leave it with that, there's the benefit of the neuroplasticity for sure, but there's so much untapped what's the what are we're leaving so much untapped if we're not really continuing that journey and looking at it, what it brings up. So the medicine brings up things, and then it's our job to start down that road of actually healing that or looking at it more deeply and seeing what that's all about. So sometimes during a journey, um, I've had women that have like these really hard emotions come up, difficult emotions, but they can't even pinpoint what it's about. And so sometimes it's talking through those things to try to even make sense of what happened. Um, Other times there's things that come up that are even sometimes some repressed memories or things that they'd forgotten about. And it's now this point of like connecting the dots and trying to figure, okay, but how do I move forward? How is this helpful for me moving forward? And a lot of times, I mean, you don't embark on this kind of journey unless you're at this place where you're doing some real introspective work, when it's not something you just decide to do offhanded. It's something that's a serious decision. There's such a sacredness to it. I would say that this is a therapeutic journey when I'm working with people. And so being able to walk through that and see not only how to create action items, right? It's not about how to move forward with that, but how to change who we are internally. How do we sit with ourselves differently? How do we occur to other people differently? Um, there's just this profound shift and even seeing the world different. And you're like, how do I assimilate back to this? And
Completely
yeah,
different in a good way. In a
yeah,
good way. And
yeah,
I want to just say I completely agree with you. I think that if you're not called to the medicine, you shouldn't do it. If you're
absolutely.
called to it, you should do it. And also, I want to be really clear because I'm not sure that I've been clear on other podcasts. It's made such a difference in my life. But it's important to approach any of this type of medicine as medicine, and do it in that sort of setting where it's all about introspection and looking inward so that you can show up outwardly
Yeah,
and inwardly better. I completely don't condone people doing this on their own or in a recreational setting. I think that people are asking for a lot of trouble if they're not sitting with somebody who's there to hold space for them And then we're somebody like yourself working through what comes up afterwards,
for
because
sure.
there's just so it's so deep.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea that, oh, I had something. Anyway, it'll
That's
come
one thing that
later.
happens in the midlife
Right.
unraveling. We sometimes forget things.
Yep, yep.
Oh, that's all right. Is there anything else today, Tina, that you want to share with our listeners?
Mhm.
This has been
Yeah.
such good information.
Yeah, just this idea that, you know, midlife, the second half, the second journey, however you want to look at that, can be just as exciting and fulfilling and rewarding as the first part of our life. It looks different for sure. But yeah, I just see so many women kind of lose that light. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
this is a second mountain now that we get to explore, but there's so much out there. Yeah,
That's so true. In our society, we're taught that older women aren't valuable.
right.
When you lose your beauty, you're not valuable. When you lose your sexuality or it shifts, you're not as valuable. When you're not mothering, or climbing the corporate ladder, because it's either or, right? In our world, you're not as valuable. And it's interesting because in times in the past, there was matriarchal societies, and the older women led them, because once all of those things, women are amazing, man. Women can multitask. We do so many things. Like, men are really good at one thing. They don't multitask. Women do all the things. And once those things, the child rearing, the, keeping your husband satisfied, once all the business, like once that life is created, we have so much wisdom to share with the rest of the world. And I think we would live in a really different society if older women were valued and looked to for guidance.
Absolutely.
It'd be
And
a
I'm seeing the
different world.
shift and I'm
Yes.
so excited about the future. And like you said, even the younger generation, it seems like they're not buying into the same things that we did. And so yeah, there's definitely a shift and I'm here
The
for it. I'm
feminine is
excited.
rising. So am I. I say that. You and I even say some of the same things. I am here for it. And I love, I said that because you said it's our second mountain. I always say when you're climbing that first mountain, you think, oh my gosh, this is the pinnacle. And then you get three-quarters of the way up and you look over and there's another higher mountain. And that's exactly, it's just that shift to that next mountain.
Yeah.
I would argue that this phase of life, I prefer it. I much prefer it. It's
Yeah.
way more enjoyable.
There
I
is
like myself more than I ever did before.
very much being in our own skin more, I think. There's things from with the kids when they were little stuff like oh, those were such great moments and there's so much great times with that. But I'm telling you, there's some really cool stuff in this phase of life too that can really not only light you up, but light others up when you share your gifts. Yeah.
Yeah. So Tina, how do our listeners reach you? If somebody is going through that crisis point and they know they need help, how can someone reach out to you?
Yeah, the easiest way is my website. So it's coachtinaandrews.com. Um, I have Instagram, the same thing, Coach Tina Andrews. And then I do have a Facebook page too that's under the company name Reawakening You.
Okay, beautiful. And so I have two questions that I ask all of my guests before I let you go. And the first one is, what is one book that you recommend that all of our listeners read?
Mm. That's a big question. I have so many books in my bookcase, but the one I would recommend, just because that's what I'm really working through now with some women. I love Brene Brown stuff. All of her are so good, but she has the book, The Gifts of Imperfection, which she talks about the 10 guideposts of wholehearted living. And that is when she was going through her midlife awakening and all the unraveling. And reading that book, I think I read that. It was probably 10 years ago. It was like, oh, somebody understand, like somebody gets me, right? It was so, and I was listening to it on an Audible on a drive, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And the next thing, oh my gosh. And it's one of those books that you can come back to like every year, every couple of years. It's a pretty quick read, and you're in a different place. You'll pick up different things, but it's so eye-opening, especially for all the stuff that we're going through in midlife.
I've read some of her books and that isn't one of them. So that will be the next book that I read.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
My second and final question for you is, what is one thing that you wish everyone knew?
Oh, um, I think it would come down being tied to our self-worth, that we are inherently worthy just for who we are. Um, our worth is not tied to what we do, how much may we give. It's we're worthy because we're here. We're worthy of love. We're of how we show up and who we are. I think there's so much, right? We've been hustling and trying to prove ourselves and give and overgive and just to earn that worthiness, and how things shift. We are enough as we are. And oh, if people could really, even getting out of not just the headspace, but to really get that in their body, to really feel that, the world would change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to end on that. You are worthy simply because you are.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tina, for being with me today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeri. It was great talking with you.